So I have the time as 6:59. I think we're going to give it until about 7:02 before we get going with our programming. So sit tight, get comfortable. We're so glad you're here. Once again, welcome everyone. My name is Chris Donfrancesco. I'm a senior policy analyst with the National Education Association, and I'm pleased to be joined here tonight by some wonderful panelists, experts from the NEA, the National Assessment Governing Board, and the National Center for Education Statistics. We are going to get started here in just one moment. But before we do, I have a housekeeping item to review with all of you. At the bottom of your screen, if it's not showing already, you should be able to enable closed captioning so that you can see the transcript as it's being recorded. So that is an option for anyone who is either having trouble hearing one of our speakers, or if you're like me and you like to read and have that supplement, it's a useful tool. You can also click it and drag it to any place on your screen, wherever it's convenient for you to view. Please keep in mind this event is being recorded. So by participating in this event, it's a webinar, so you won't be shown unless you are promoted to a panelist, but we always want to be transparent with you. This is a recorded event because we're excited to share this after the fact with our members from across the country. So once again, this is a recorded event. Finally, we're really proud to share with you and with our wonderful colleagues at NAGB and NCES a practice that is near and dear to all of our hearts at the National Education Association, and that is our native land acknowledgement. So with that, I'm going to invite you to take a moment and join me and pause for our native land acknowledgement. I've got our first link for the night that I'm going to drop in the chat. So if you'd like to join me in exploring native lands, you can go ahead and access the link and check out the map, which is something I always enjoy doing. So with that, let's go ahead and get started this evening. We begin by acknowledging that we, across the country, meet on the traditional lands served by Native peoples. We honor America's first people and all elders, past, present, and emerging. And we are called to learn and share what we learn about the tribal history, culture, and contributions that have been suppressed in telling the story of America. At this time, I want to issue a warm welcome to NEA Secretary Treasurer Noel Candelaria, who's going to give us some welcome remarks and stage setting this evening. And so with that, Noel, I will kick it to you.
Thank you, Chris, and good evening. Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the 3 million members of the National Education Association, which includes educators who are teachers, who are specialized instructional support personnel like counselors, speech pathologists, various education support professional career families, like we have some facility managers, paraeducators, bookkeepers, secretaries, that everyone who works in our public schools who believe in our vision of great public schools for every student as we organize to unite our members and the nation. So I welcome you to the National Assessment Governing Board webinar. Mi nombre es Noel Candelaria y soy el secretario tesorero de la Asociación Nacional de Educación. My name is Noel Candelaria, and I am the secretary treasurer of the National Education Association. I'm very excited that you are here with us this evening, and I thank you all for participating in what I believe will be an informative and constructive conversation about the future of assessments in our nation. So as educators, we understand that standardized testing is one of many assessment strategies used to determine student achievement and needs. However, too often, the over-reliance on standardized tests limits our ability to accurately evaluate what students know and can do. When an assessment of learning is done well, students can express the full breadth of their knowledge and skills. It encourages students to become lifelong learners and drives the development of appropriate learning experiences. See, this is the basis of our conversation this evening. But let me begin by acknowledging a few people who will be joining us this evening. Nardi Rotten is a governing board member and a fourth grade educator. She has been instrumental in helping us plan and execute this webinar. She is excited about the prospect of more educators accessing and using the tools from the nation's report card. Thank you, Nardi, for joining us and for all your support. Darian Spann is a governing board member and high school principal in Mississippi. Darian is also an NEA member and former NEA board member. He currently serves as vice president of the Mississippi Association of Educators, and he is an accomplished lifelong learner and school leader. NEA was excited to support Darian's nomination to serve on this board. Darian is an example of what happens when our members step forward as leaders, both in and outside their classroom, to drive positive outcomes for students. Ebony Walton is a statistician with the National Center for Education Statistics. She specializes in reporting and dissemination of results of the NAEP, which is the nation's report card. Ebony cares deeply about making the information from the NAEP accessible and usable for our members, and she's excited to join us for this event. Ebony's mother is also here this evening to support her daughter because Ebony's mother is a proud NEA member. Stephanie Harris, who's also joining us this evening, Stefan Harris, I'm sorry, is an assistant director for communications, the National Assessment Governing Board. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge NEA President Becky Pringle. President Pringle established the NEA Task Force on the Future of Assessment. She led inspired efforts to advocate for members and students during and beyond the pandemic to put student learning first as students return to our schools after the COVID shutdown. NEA Vice President Princess Moss serves as the chair of the task force on the future of assessment, along with a group of highly qualified members from across the country nominated by state affiliate presidents, some who are with us this evening. And we have some amazing NEA staff led by Daya Bilal Threets, NEA Senior Director for Education Policy and Implementation, which spearheads NEA's efforts around research and policy analysis on key issues, including accountability and assessment. Thank you all for your support. This webinar was created for three reasons. One, we want educators to learn about the history, value, and vision of the National Assessment Governing Board and the NAEP Nations Report Card and the potential it has to tell us about student performance across subjects and grades over time. And two, we want to inform educators of the various tools available on the Nations Report Card website. And three, we want educators to learn about how they can use NAEP to inform teaching and learning and support student opportunities and success. See, NEA's vision is simple. We believe that every student, regardless of where they come from, what they look like, or where they live, deserve access to an excellent education that empowers them to achieve and fulfill their fullest dreams. See, we believe that to reach that end, we must employ quality assessment practices that generate accurate, useful evidence of student learning to support instruction and student success. As many of you know, NAEP is commonly referred to as the gold standard in large-scale assessment. We have always believed that there is a need for accurate information that can tell us as educators how students are doing academically now and over time. And NAEP plays an important role in fulfilling that need by producing results that are reliable, that are valid, and high quality. See, in just a few moments, you'll hear more from folks who design, deliver, and analyze NAEP about its approach to making sure that we have a complete picture of what our students know and can do. And perhaps most importantly, NAEP is low stakes. In other words, it's not just used for ranking or sorting schools, and it does not lead to punitive measures against individual schools, educators, or students. See, NAEP's results are purely informational, and states and districts do not invest time in preparing students for these assessments specifically. And to that end, we believe that they are accurate and useful for telling us about education quality and opportunity in the US. NAEP is also a useful tool as part of a balanced, equitable assessment system that is student-centered and provides valuable information for a diverse array of public education interests and partners. See, the design and administration of this assessment and the involvement of educators and practitioners from the field align with our beliefs and recommendations as in NEA's principles for the future of assessment. Now, I'd like to provide a quick overview of NEA's 5 guiding principles for the future of assessments. The first is a community-based and student-centered process. We believe by engaging students, families, caregivers, educators, policymakers, and community members, we can create an assessment system that truly reflects the needs and aspirations of all stakeholders. And the second principle ensures that we recognize the critical role of educators in this work. We know that educators play a central role in understanding student progress and guiding instruction using high-quality assessment practices. And 3, we must prioritize assessment that fosters student self-efficacy. Students believe in their ability to succeed. See, when students feel confident and capable, they will thrive. And 4, we must generate well-rounded evidence. Our current assessment systems often rely on high-stakes standardized tests. However, to truly understand student learning, we need a balanced, equitable approach. See, well-rounded assessment practices consider various aspects of student performance, including creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, and problem-solving skills. And 5, there must be culturally relevant and responsive assessments. See, assessment should honor a student's diverse identity, their backgrounds and experiences. By embracing culturally relevant and responsive approaches, we ensure that assessment methods resonate with all students. Now, you can learn more about NEA's guiding principles by clicking on the link in the chat. And in closing, there are 3 things we need educators to do. 1 is give us feedback and tell your stories. If you access those tools from NAEP, the Nation's Report Card, in your practice by emailing futureofourschools@nea.org. All right, so that's going to be your homework, right? And you'll get a reminder of this here at the end, because we want to hear your stories. And 2, be sure to fill out any surveys administered in your school by NAGB or NAEP and support the administration of the NAEP in your localities if that opportunity arises. And 3, we need you to join the Assessment Action Network on NEA's Ed Communities to stay apprised of the opportunities to engage on assessment matters, including news and updates on the Nation's Report Card. And you'll find those links in the chat, and you'll get an email following this event. Again, I want to thank you again and welcome you for your participation in tonight's webinar. I will now turn it over to Nardi, who, as I mentioned, is a teacher member of the National Assessment Governing Board. Nardi?
Thank you, and hello, everyone. It is such a pleasure to speak to my teacher colleagues across the country. Again, my name is Nardi Roughton. I am a proud 4th grade teacher at Creekside Elementary School in New Bern, North Carolina. I want to use this time to tell you about my role in the National Assessment Governing Board and how the Nation's Report Card can be a valuable, useful tool to you as an educator. So if we can start the slides. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the governing board. I've been a proud member since 2018, actually. I'm serving my second term right now. The board was created by Congress in 1988, and it's to be a nonpartisan, independent body, and the purpose is to set policy for the nation's report card, or NAEP. We work with other partners, NCES, to maintain NAEP as a gold standard of assessment. The only source that lets you see what students know and can do in many subjects by nation, state, and the large urban districts. The governing board has 26 members with a diverse background with diverse viewpoints as well. Several of the members represent educator and parent leadership, including slots for 4th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade teachers, principals at the elementary level and at the secondary level. We have local superintendents and 2 parent leaders. I'm especially proud that so many leaders who are in the schools with our kids every day can bring that on the ground perspective as we make important decisions. Next slide, please. So one distinct role that the governing board plays for NAEP is developing the achievement levels. This represents what students should know and should be able to do. We have 3 of them. We have NAEP Basic, NAEP Proficient, and NAEP Advanced. And you see the definitions for each of the levels on this slide. Our achievement levels are designed specifically for what NAEP measures, and they are intentionally set to be the goal of what students should know. They're different than than the levels you see on state assessments and local assessments. Also, NAEP Proficient, despite what you may have seen in some media stories, it does not mean on grade level, as that would indicate that NAEP is tied to students' grades and state tests and standards or curriculum, which they are not. So next slide, please. Another role of the governing board is to develop frameworks. Frameworks are the blueprints that determine the content of NAEP, which is a test that the students take. This slide gives you a taste of the many steps involved in the multi-year comprehensive process of both developing and drafting the framework, and then creating it, reviewing, testing items or questions on the NAEP exam. And all those questions come from the content of the framework. I do want to point out that our framework panels include teachers. So we have that essential classroom voice and perspective in shaping what NAEP should cover. Also, our process involves soliciting public comment, and this public comment is nationwide. So people with an interest or experience in education or the subject matter can submit suggestions and feedback that provide helpful information. So you can visit our website at www.nagb.gov, that's NAGB.gov, and under the menu, you select NAEP subject areas. You click on the subject you're interested, and then you will see the most current framework posted. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, discussing the achievement levels, NAEP is different than state assessments. NAEP shines a lot of student achievement nationally and reflects the condition of our national educational system. And it's not about teachers or school accountability. It's the only assessment that allows state comparisons, which is very helpful in allowing local leaders to see trends, use the data to help inform policies and efforts to improve student achievement. It also assesses numerous subjects beyond reading and math. It includes civics, history, science, that they are all essential for students' well-being and future success in the workforce. Next slide, please. So NAEP survey data, NAEP also has a valuable contextual data that's gleaned from questions, forms filled out by teachers, administrators, and students. These data shine a light on teacher and student experiences, as well as various factors such as availability of resources that could or could not affect learning. I pulled one example from our NAEP reading assessment for grade 4, where teachers were asked about work satisfaction. You can see the results here from 2022, the most recent, compared to the last assessment in 2019. Fewer teachers are feeling satisfied with their occupation or inspired. This is a depressing trend, but these kinds of insights hopefully will motivate change that's needed to improve conditions. Now, I'm going to show you some different ways that I use NAEP and where I've gone on the Nation's Report Card website for those resources. Next slide. Okay, so first I use NAEP to gauge how my state is doing. However, to make it more relevant to me and my classroom, I use tools to create a NAEP-like assessment. First, I go to the nationsreportcard.gov and I click Take NAEP Now, and you can see the red circle in the upper corner. Next, I select a test. Next slide. Yes, select test. Next slide, please. And then I can choose a subject here. For my example, I chose math. Once you choose the subject, you can choose the grade level. Next slide, please. Okay, so here you can select grade 4 or grade 8. Because I'm a 4th grade teacher, I chose 4th grade. Next slide, please. And then I choose the test. I chose math, and then I click the, you can either take a no calculator or calculator, and then you choose the test. Then you click choose test, and you can actually see the test. And then next slide, please. Now here you put in your school email because you're going to be emailed some information. Give your test a name. I just said NAEP number 1 or math NAEP number 1, whatever title you want to give it to. And then you put the number of students that you have. And then you click confirm. Next slide, please. All right, and one more. That's my information. All right, so this is what you receive. And you can see on the top, you see a link to the test. I take that link and I put it in Google Classroom. That's the platform I use in my school, but you can use it any platform that you want. You can even email it to your students. Now, each student has received a test code. What I do is I type little tickets and I give each student a test, a code. I keep a record to match the student name to this test code because I want to see, although NAEP does not give individual scores, I keep records because I want to see how my students do in relationship to what my state does. All right, and then go ahead and next slide, please. So here, when your students click the link, they will receive this test code, and that's where they put their test code in. Now, I did find out that it did not work on iPads, but from my understanding, that's being looked at, and hopefully in the future it can. This works perfectly on Chromebooks. Also, this is such a low stress type of test. It's 13 questions. It takes less than 30 minutes. And then I can check to see how my students do in relationship to the state that I live, which is North Carolina. I have to share the comments that I received from students who took the test. They said, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. I like this so much better. This is engaging. Can we do more of this? And I just had to smile. This was amazing. So I love that. Next slide, please. I think that might be it for that. Okay, now I'm not ready yet. So another way I use, not only do I use that tool, but you can use it for reading. You can use it for math. I first used it as a 3rd grade teacher, and I gave the 4th grade test to my 3rd graders because I wanted to see where they were, and I was pretty amazed with what they can do. I also use NAEP data for other grade bands. For example, the most recent results of the 8th grade history and civics test showed that only 13% of US students hit NAEP proficient in US history, and 22% reached that goal in civics. The students who took that test were in 8th grade, but their knowledge and skill gaps did not start in middle school. So that's where I had to step back as a 4th grade teacher, and I need to see, what can I do? This was a wake-up call for me to add social studies into my already packed day. So I wanted to make sure that I expose my 4th graders to authentic learning as a foundation for their learning as they move up in the grade levels. I actually wrote an article about this very thing, of how it made me look at how I teach social studies and how can I get my colleagues in the early grades to take advantage of this, and so their kids can take advantage of it and be successful in their academic career. So these are just a few examples of how I use NAEP as an educator. So I'm going to pass this to Ebony.
All right. Thank you so much, Nardi. And thank you for those who are joining this afternoon, evening. I just want to briefly talk a little bit more about the program, its history, and what we do at the National Center for Education Statistics. Next slide. All right, so Public Law 107-279 is our governing authority for us to operate this program, this National Assessment of Educational Progress. And I mentioned that law because it specifically tells us how often we have to assess certain subjects, and it also gives some prohibitions. So I'm gonna mention some of these features or factors in the law. One thing is we must assess at least every 2 years grades 4 and 8 mathematics and reading assessments to students across the country. We can go back to the previous slide. The other thing that we must do is assess grade 12 students in mathematics and reading every 4 years. Now, as you can see on the side there are different subjects that we also assess: science, civics, US history. These subjects are assessed when resources are available. We have another assessment, and I'll mention this particularly when I get into our history. We have an assessment called NAEP Long-Term Trend, and the law also mandates that we assess the long-term trend assessments at ages 9, 13, and 17 with some periodicity. So another feature of the law, and something that should be useful to you in understanding our purpose, is that our data are not to be used for ranking individual students, teachers, or schools. That is not our role. And so our data is very, very high level to be able to report results at a national level, at state levels for mathematics and reading particularly, and for some select districts, depending on the subject. So that's something for you to keep in mind. The other piece is that our program is not meant to influence standards and curriculum. Again, we are measuring at a high level what students know and can do, given the expertise that governs the program and that provides insights into what students should know and can do in various subjects. We use those objectives to design an assessment that is not necessarily leaning toward one curricula or another. In addition, I just want to point out that we report trends over time. You know, we have a very unique assessment, and we'll show you how long our trends can go. That's very unique from other assessment programs that can change their content routinely in a way that will not allow you to see how progress is being made over a period of time. And as I mentioned, we report statistics at student group level. That's very, very important. We will never be able to report at a student level or even a school level. It's at a student group level. And as was already mentioned, we are considered a gold standard of large scale assessment. In fact, given our history, a lot of what we do has helped or assist other assessment development down the road. So we're almost like the grandfather of assessments to a certain degree. A lot of what we've done has been implemented in other assessment programs currently. Now, I would like to talk about my organization, the National Center for Education Statistics. This center has existed for over 100 years, and we are the primary federal statistical agency that produces data on education across the country. All right, so we make sure that our data are timely, that they're objective, relevant, and useful. That is our service, that is our mission, and that's what we apply when we conduct NAEP assessments and when we report our data. A little bit more background of our history. So let's go down the road. Let's start back in 1964 when our commissioner, Francis Keppel, really thought about the idea of having a national assessment. And the reason was because for the first 40 years or so of the center, we had so much information about inputs. We had so much information about school finance, the number of schools and students, but we had very, very little information at that particular time about outcomes or output, how well are students learning. So again, at that time, it was critical to design an assessment that gives us some insights about what students know and can do. And so in 1969, we had our first assessment, and guess what we assessed? Citizenship, science, and writing skills. Those were some of the first subjects that we assessed in this program. Over time, we started innovating how we do our assessments, our psychometrics, and our design behind our assessments. And because of that, we split our assessment program into two strands that still exist today: main NAEP, which is what I'm going to really focus on later, but also long-term trend NAEP, which is also in operation. And in 1988, the National Assessment Governing Board was established. And again, this group provides policy and guidance for the program. Moving down the road, in the 90s, we had our first state level assessment given in grade 8 mathematics. We continue the state level assessments today. We also had that mandate that I mentioned in the public law about making sure that we assess grades 4 and 8 mathematics and reading every 2 years. And in 2002, we started our trial urban district assessment program, where we were able to report results for select districts across the country. And in more recent years, we started really getting into technology and using technology to assess our students with our grade 12 state level pilot, something that was something that we tried. It's very difficult to assess students at 12th grade across the country given differences, but we did try that. But we also got into interactive computer tasks for science way back in 2009 in our assessments. In 2017, that was a key year for the program to transition our paper-based assessments. From the very beginning, we were using paper booklets. In 2017, we started transitioning our assessments to digitally based assessments in 2017. And then as we were, preparing to assess students, we ran against that brick wall of COVID-19 pandemic, and we had to postpone. But in that postponement, that did not stop the center from wanting to collect valuable information that can help inform you all and policymakers address the needs of students during that time. So in 2021, we implemented an NCES monthly school survey, in where we were able to survey schools and the types of teaching conditions and learning opportunities students had during the height of the pandemic. And those data were very, very valuable to help keep everyone abreast of what was happening across the country. And so that's not our end, of course. The road's going to continue and we're going to continue to innovate, but that was just a nice recap of some milestones of the program. Now, this slide here is intended to show you that you may have run across NAEP data, even though you might not know the program officially. These are just some headlines and some outlets that tend to showcase our data. Even local outlets also showcase our data. But most times when you hear about national scores in math or reading, even civics or US history, chances are you're running across NAEP. So my last slide there is just another plug. If and when your school is selected to participate in NAEP, it would be wonderful if you, school leaders, teachers, also complete our questionnaires. We have student questionnaires, teacher questionnaires, and school questionnaires. These data are as valuable as our cognitive results. We're not just all about math scores going up and down. We also want to be able to report on the context of the learning environments for students and the experiences of teachers and the conditions of schools, because we know all of those contextual factors matter when it comes to interpreting the cognitive results at the end. So I just wanted to put in there, an encouragement. If you see a survey from us, we would love for you to participate so that we're able to produce valuable data for the country broadly. So thank you. At this time, I'll pass it to Darian.
Thank you so much, Ebony. At this time, this is our first Q&A. I would like to just reiterate, my name is Darian Spann. I'm currently a high school principal here in Mississippi, currently serving as vice president of our state association here in Mississippi. And through nominations by the NEA leadership, I represent secondary principals on the NADB board, and I'm excited to do so. So I will, we'll start out, there is a, Christine, if you would put up the Padlet question, there will be a question in the chat box that you can participate in at this time, asking, we know that there have been fundamental shifts in school academic attendance and engagement since the pandemic. What are the most influential, predominant factors impacting students' learning experiences and opportunities? So if you would take a few minutes and respond to that question in the chat. While doing so, I want to acknowledge Ellen from Ohio, who submitted a comment. We thank you, Ellen, for doing so. Also want to acknowledge Eric from Utah, who is an ESP, who's interested and wanted to know more about the assessment. So thank you so much, Eric, for doing so as well. All right. I'm just looking at some of the comments. They're coming in, just giving you a few minutes to, I see the overuse of cell phones in classroom settings, addiction to cell phones and social media. Cell phones and social media seems to be some of the factors and barriers that all right, continue. Addition to cell phone and social media. So I have a question here. George from Missouri sent in a question and asked, is anyone at NAEP interested in CTE assessments? And so, you know, NAEP is always looking at, as the gold standard, looking at ways to show data in all areas, but not at this time are they looking at CTE assessments. I see some more comments from the chat box. Pandemic influences, literacy is a struggle since the pandemic. EL students is a concern as well. Parent attitudes about teachers and supports they give and do not give. Attendance is definitely an issue, school regular attendance for staff, interesting, and students. Disruption in student personal schedules as well. So great comments to that question. We have a question also from Karen from Delaware. Karen from Delaware, she did mention that she is a member of our Leaders for Just School program. But Karen asked, when will we shift from measuring outputs to authentically measuring inputs? Ebony, can you respond to that question?
Great. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, there was, you know, very little information about outputs. And so now it looks like the pendulum has swung. Now there's so much assessment data out there. We're getting so much information about what students know and can do that it's important to consider the inputs, as you mentioned. I will say that the center continues to collect information on inputs that we've historically done, but also new factors as well. We are continually rethinking our contextual factors that we collect. As I mentioned, you know, even with our surveys within the NAEP program, We do our best to get a good handle of those concrete things, those tangible things that relate to achievement, that are important. And we know that can change and vary over time and across geography. So we're mindful of that balance, and we are working as a center and as a program to be able to collect those data as well.
Thank you so much, Ebony. I see some more comments. Disruption in student personal schedules, student and family priorities, away from school attendance and grades. They don't seem as focused on the kind of achievement. We talked about, attendance was mentioned, social media, lack of parental support, expectations matching those of the educators. We talked about pandemic influences as well. I have another question from Karen from Delaware. She asks, how does the federal government monitor and evaluate the use of title money? Nardi, can you respond to that question?
Repeat that question again. I thought I
Yeah.
saw it in the chat box.
Yeah. How does the federal government monitor and evaluate the use of title money?
That one that's a good one. I'm going to be honest and say I'm not sure. I do not work for a Title I school, so I'm going to push that out there to, I'm going to be honest and say I don't know how they check into it. I'm sure there is a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of things that have to be filed being a Title I school. So that's a way that the federal government can keep track of that. That's all I know on my end.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, folks. Darian, if I can pop in on that one.
Yeah.
I would just note that we all know and operate under the ramifications that various title programs have for funding and supporting our schools. It's important to note that the administration of NAEP does not dictate, in particular, how resources are driven. It's informational, it's based on transparency. The results are available to not just policymakers, but the entire country and the world for that matter. So it actually doesn't dictate things like Title I designations, disbursements, qualifications for programming under various title funds. This is a very distinct and separate administration of a uniquely positioned assessment that is authorized by Congress. And so that puts NAEP and the Nation's Report Card slightly, it gives them kind of an arm's length away from some of the titled programming.
Thank you so much, Christine. There is a question in the chat. Students at my school took a NAEP assessment that had a series of performance items in high school science, such as making acid and basic solutions with indicators and playing with pendulums. Are those type of questions still being used? Ebony, can you answer that
Great.
for us?
Actually, I was trying to go through my mind. When was the last time we assessed grade 12 science? I think that was a while ago. But at that time, particularly if you're talking about hands-on tasks, that was a special assessment program before we were digital, before we gave digital assessments, where we gave student science kits and everything to see how they conducted experiments. Currently, hands-on task items are not part of what we measure now. We did just administer the science assessment at grade 8, but on a digital basis, not with hands-on tasks.
Thank you so much. One more question, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Ebony. Are there measures being taken by this group to push minimizing assessment? And this is Jacqueline. And Jacqueline, I think Noel mentioned in his opening that the NEA supports minimizing assessments. And so I'll let Christine kind of jump in and kind of feel what Noel kind of talked about.
Perfect. Yeah. Jacqueline, thank you very much for your question. Once again, when it comes to NAGB and NCES, part of the reason that NEA holds such high regard for them and they're so highly regarded in the measurement community is because, it's a nonpartisan assessment mechanism for evaluating student knowledge and progress. To the extent that NAEP may offer an alternative to potentially duplicative testing, I would argue is beyond the scope of what NAGB and NCES can comment on this evening. However, I will tell you that from our perspective as the NEA, we want to make sure that when students are participating in an assessment, there's a value added. There's some new piece of information that it is offering to give a full and complete picture of what students know and what they need to know to go forward. So I am absolutely happy to answer any direct questions from members and participants and follow up with you. I will pop our email address in the chat because I think you ask a really, really important question, one that I'm happy to answer. Just happens to be beyond the scope of the current conversation, but thank you.
Thank you, Christine. At this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Ebony.
All right, thank you. Okay, everyone, now we're going to get a little deeper. This is our 201. And so what I'm going to do is walk you through the nationsreportcard.gov with hopes that you'll be able to locate information of interest to you in the future. So I'm going to share my screen now. And let's get started. Okay, it says I cannot start. I'm having some issues sharing my, there we go, perfect. All right, very good. So what I'm showing now on my screen, hopefully you see it, is the Nations Report Card. So if you go to nationsreportcard.gov, you'll get a page like this. And we frequently change the header with interesting facts and figures from recent studies or recent reports. This one in particular, I'm very interested in. Many times you hear about score gaps between different student groups. And in this case, our data show that 70% of the score gap between white and Hispanic students is associated with socioeconomic status. If you're interested in that, feel free to click in the little tool and play with some data to see other findings. But in any case, we're going to get into our mathematics report card. That's what I want to focus today. So when you go to nationsreportcard.gov, this little menu here that says reports, you're able to click on different subjects and different products under each subject. In this case here, what I'm showing is our highlights from the last time we released results for mathematics, 2022 results. And just to let you know, if you want to kind of get a general sense of what happened across the country, I would start with the highlights page. That gives you a very broad stroke of what happened nationally, across states, and across 26 urban districts. But I'm not going to go through the results here. We're going to go a little deeper. What we're going to do now is when you go to reports, there's a little section here that says report card for nations, states, and districts, grades 4 and 8. That's the link that you should click on to get more results. And here you see, hopefully, a pretty simple interface for you to interact with. We have a home page. We have information for nation, states, and districts, and sample questions, survey questionnaires, etc. So this menu here is how you navigate through the report card. We also have little tabs here to give you a little bit more information based on the statistic of interest. And in this case, what we're doing is looking at national results and average scores for grade 8 math. When I scroll down, you'll see a chart, and it shows you average scores since 1990. I told you that NAEP has long trend lines, and in the case of math, we go all the way back to the 90s. We're able to track progress or change over a long window. And what you'll see are little dots that represent our average scores nationally. And you'll also see asterisks. These asterisks are very important. And throughout this demonstration, I want to give you some pro tips for interpreting our data. Anytime you see an asterisk, that means that these scores here are statistically different from the score of the reference year. In this case, the reference year is 2022. So in 2022, 8th grade students on average scored 274 on an NAEP scale. 274 was statistically different from 282 in 2019. That's what the asterisk says, but it's not statistically different from the 273 in 2000. The reason why I mention this is because NAEP is based on samples of students, and each student receives just a small part of the test. So for lack of a better word, these estimates have error around them. So in order to really detect change, we have to do statistical tests. So as you look at our results, be on the lookout for asterisks or some type of up and down arrow. Don't just use your eyeballs to look at the numbers. That's just a pro tip for you all. In any case, so grade 8 math, the line was going upward, over time. That's good news. And again, this is a nation. This is a large amount of students where we're seeing progress over time. But we do see some stalling over the last decade or so. And then, of course, COVID, we know what happens. I don't want to get on and dig too much into the declines because I want you all to come back to this website when we release the 24 results. And let's see what happens to the trend line then. So again, with eyes of looking to the future, I just want to show you how to interpret our results. So this is scores on average. But what's important also to look at are changes across different levels of performance. It's not just the average score line that you should pay attention to. What we do is provide results for students who are lower performing, those who are at the 10th and 25th percentiles, those who are performing about average, students who perform at the 50th, and then our higher performing students, those performing at the 75th and 90th. The reason why it's important is, if you can tell, just looking at the lines, you'll see almost different patterns. In some cases, you'll see our top performers, making progress, while our bottom performers are doing something different. They're making declines. In fact, what we saw between 2009 and 2019, our lower performing students was declining. They declined before the pandemic, but our high performing students, they were making improvements. And so on average, we were reporting no change, but that wasn't the truth. The truth was that students, depending on how they performed, they were trending in different patterns. So when we look at these 24 results, trust us, we will be looking at how students across different performance levels have changed over time, over these past 2 years, to see if there are differences. Is everyone changing the same way, or is there some difference there between higher performing students and lower performing students? All right, so that's on the national page for average scores. We have other statistics. Want to get a little deeper? If you want to look at performance for different student groups, this is where you do it here in the student groups page. So here we have scores for students by their race, ethnicity, gender, national school lunch eligibility. In 2024, we will relabel this as economically disadvantaged status to be a bit more accurate with our data collection. We have information on students in charter schools, students who are classified with disabilities, etc. So if you want to get even more information about how students are performing, you can check here by different student group levels. And when you click, I'm trying to pick one out. You also get trend lines over time to see how their performance has changed. All right, moving on. So scale scores are very unique to NAEP. Honestly, they don't really have much interpretive power outside of NAEP. They were meant to help you understand the skills that students demonstrated on NAEP items. So in order to make a little bit more sense about what students know and can do, the National Assessment Governing Board has set up what we call our NAEP achievement levels, as Nardi mentioned. We have NAEP Basic, NAEP Proficient, and NAEP Advanced. If you want to dig in a little bit more, you can click on these hyperlinks to get a sense of what we mean by NAEP Basic, etc. And what we present are the percentages of students who reach these achievement levels within a year and over time. And what I'm going to do here is look at the percentage of students who performed at or above NAEP Proficient in grade 8 math. Starting in 1990, it was 15%. Now it's 26%. So over the long term, there has been improvement in the number or the percentage of students able to meet that benchmark of NAEP Proficient. But another thing that we're keeping our eye on are the students who aren't reaching the NAEP Basic level. And in this case, what we see in 1990, 48% of students were below NAEP Basic. Now it's 38%. So still over the long run, we've made progress, But when you look at those more recent years, that 38 is larger than what we were, where we were since 2003. Okay, so that's a growing pattern that we've been monitoring, the amount of students, the number of students who aren't reaching NAEP basic. All right, let's dig in a little bit more. Now, as I mentioned, these achievement levels are made to help you understand the skills and knowledge of what students can do at different levels. If you want more details about what it means to be NAEP Basic, we have more information here that explains the types of things, the types of tasks that a student who performs at basic is likely to do. So if you want more details, we have that available on the web, and it gives you a little bit more specifics in addition to the framework. If you want kind of a high level summary of the skills at the achievement levels, you can also look here on the web. All right, now everything that I showed you nationally, you can also see for states and for selected districts. And so what I'm doing now is moving to the state section for average scores for grade 8 math. And I'm going to scroll down and show you this map. This map is a very quick view of the states that had significant score changes between 2019 and 2022, the last two times we made this assessment. In this case, it shows you a little key. It shows you basically all of these jurisdictions had significant declines on average in grade 8 math. Utah and Department of Defense schools had no statistically significant difference in that interval. But if you're interested in a longer time, you can change your reference point to, say, 2013. How did your state do compared to 2013? In this case, we're seeing 3 jurisdictions not have a significant difference from 2022. Or you can go back to even 2003. That's the year that all states participated routinely on NAEP. And now you can see how your state has progressed over different time intervals very quickly. But if you want even more specific information about how your state performed, I'm going to click Ohio. We provide our trend lines for the nation, the little circles, and also the little pluses. That's Ohio. And I know that it's hard sometimes to read a chart. So we have the table option as well. If you actually want to see the score, you can click table. So that gives you a high level overview of state level results. We have a similar map for our districts. So moving to districts. These are the 26 urban districts where we provide NAEP results for grades 4 and 8 math and reading. And again, you can do the same thing, change your reference here. In this case, the tutor program started in 2003 with only a few tutors, and you're able to see how those scores compared over that interval. But over time, we've added more. And again, you can click on that district and get specific trend lines for your district over time. All right. Now, that's all the cognitive results. Let's go even deeper. So that's at a high level, looking at math scores across 5 content areas, all summed up into a score or an achievement level. And we find those data points valuable. But if you want to get a better perspective of what students know and can do on particular tasks, then you need to go to our sample questions page, where we release some items and we show the percentage of students that were able to answer that question correctly. So in this case, I'm in grade 8 math, and I selected algebra questions. And what you can see here, I'm going to do this one here, create an equation based on a verbal description. What we saw for this particular question, in 2019, 45% of students were able to answer this correctly. In 22, it was 41% of students answering it correctly. But when we click, you get a view of the actual item. So this was a word problem, and students were asked to drag the correct expressions that would satisfy that word problem. Okay? And there you're able to see the scoring information and what it takes to have a correct answer. And you also get the percentage of students who got it incorrect or correct. You get the percentage of students, there's partially correct questions, so you get the breakdown based on how well the students responded. And so we have a few questions here, so you can see there's some questions that didn't really change significantly over time. It held the same level of proportion of students who answered it correctly. So you can play with that. Hopefully that's very interesting for people, who are interested in these content areas. Also at the bottom, we have what we call our item map. So if you want even a better sense of a suite of items across, the NAEP content areas, you can visit our item map by clicking this link. So here we lay out sample items of students who scored like 363. They're likely to be able to answer this particular question. And you can click on the question and see how many students got that question correct. So this is a way to see ranges of tasks across, I call it performance distribution, but across different levels of performance. So if you want to see a question that's below NAEP Basic, you can click, what are we asking students who are scoring around 260? What are they likely to get correct? Here's the item. And here is the correct answer. The correct answer is A. And how did students do? 76% of students got this question correct. So this is another resource for you. If you want to see, what does it take to be NAEP proficient? Here are some sample items that these students were likely to answer correctly. All right. And the one that I showed you earlier, that was a question in the NAEP proficient range here, 308. So students who were able to answer that question were more than likely reaching or exceeding our NAEP proficient range. All right, almost done. Now, again, that's all of our cognitive data, but we also have these important contextual factors. And as you know, so if you click survey questionnaires, we do feature some data based on the student, teacher, and school surveys. In this case, with the 2022 assessment, how students and teachers managed through remote learning was of kind of top priority. So we did feature some questions and results based on students' experiences while they learned remotely. But we also have other questions. I'm scrolling down. We have questions about students' confidence in completing math tasks. And what we've seen over time is that there's been a shift. So we have low, moderate, and high levels of confidence. We ask the students a suite of questions, and based on their responses, they are in these three categories. And the students that have high levels of confidence, it was 41% in 22, 49% in 2019. These students are typically higher performing, right? And then we can see the scores and the percentages over time. So again, these are some valuable information. Students are telling us, they're self-reporting their abilities. And we're seeing a relationship in performance as well. And these data, you can look within your state, provided that your students answer this question, you're able to get data at a state level as well. And you're, again, able to kind of check these trends over time. How is it shifting? All right, so there's several things, and Nardi already showed you these data here around teacher satisfaction, but we have other questions too based on our teacher surveys. And again, this is another pro tip. NAEP results are in terms of student group performance. So the way we interpret this one here is 46% of 8th grade students had teachers that reported having too many teaching hours was not a problem. So it's in terms of students. This 46% is related to students, okay? But, so there's some very interesting data, and it spans, we have questions on professional development. So there's so many questions that are not only here, but are in our NAEP Data Explorer. And finally, if you'd like to know more information about the assessment content, about who takes our assessment in terms of our sample sizes, visit the About page, where we again give a high-level summary of these technical details. But of course, there's hyperlinks. If you want to dig more, you can click and get even deeper. But in this case, when you go to About, you can get information about the proportion of questions that students received in these 5 content areas, for instance. Okay, so that was a very quick demo of our Nations Report Card. You have these data for reading as well. So we hope that you visit it, play with it, click, dig. There's tons of links for you. And hopefully this will be a resource for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ebony. It's such great information to share. And I'm gonna jump right into this question. Ebony, this is for you. Does NAEP deaggregate by charter ISD schools, or is it just by state, subject, and student group?
Yes, so we do have, we do include charter schools in our sample when they contribute to your state's kind of reporting. I don't know if they can still call it AYP, but charter schools that are part of kind of your state reporting are part of our data, and we do disaggregate data for those schools in our sample. While I'm in here, I wanted to say that our national results include private schools, students, but our state and district level results are only public school data. Okay, so I wanted to bring that up as well.
Thank you so much for that clarification. We have a question from Leanne from Kansas, and she asks, why is looking at the Nations Report Card important for educators? And it is important because as the gold standard, it allows educators to see how their students compare to students across the country, not to compete, but to make sure we are supporting our students' growth academically that will prepare them for global society. So thank you so much, Leanne, for that question. She also asked, how is this data used to inform and drive policy? And Nardi, can you answer that question on how you all do that?
So when sitting on the board, around the board, so I'm a teacher, right? And we want to fix things. But the job of NAGB, our board members, we can't fix things. All we can do is tell the story. We have to let the data tell the story and let the policymakers, do the fixing. As much as I would like to say we need to do this, this, and this, we can't do that. Like I said, we just have to let the data tell the story and let the policymakers. We can be the voice, and I can be that teacher voice. But we have to let the policymakers make that decision.
Thank you so much. Anise from New Jersey asks, how did students do in the areas of visual and performing arts? Ebony, can you answer that question?
All right, the arts, actually one of my favorite assessments, and one that was not converted to digital. In fact, we would assess students in, like we would tape, students doing performing arts, or for visual arts, they would actually make collages that was scored. It's a very, very unique assessment. We have not completed that assessment, I don't believe since 2012. I'll have to double check. Actually, wait a second. I can look right now. It's been a while. Yes, 2016 was the last time we assessed the arts. Again, given resources, we were unable to continue that. It's not currently on the assessment schedule. But if you're interested in looking at the results in 2016, I would visit nationsreportcard.gov, and you'll get some very interesting student samples of what they produced in that assessment.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We do have a question from Michael. How do we make testing available to English language development students? Christine, did you want to answer that one?
I need you to repeat it for me one more time.
Yes. How do we make testing available to English language development students?
Multilingual learners are uniquely positioned when it comes to NAEP for a few reasons. And I'll invite my governing board members and Ebony to pipe in if they feel that there's something that I missed. But I would say that the response is very similar to, there was a great question about assessing in the arts, right? Fine and performing arts. And much of what NAEP entails, contains, and administers is dictated by both funding and resources. And that is part of why, as members, right, this is a low stakes assessment. It doesn't have punitive consequences. It's important for us to kind of raise our voices when we can, whether it's through public comment periods or other forums, to encourage the administrations of these assessments. With regard to English learners and multilingual learners, the kind of balance is twofold. First, and again, if I misspeak, please somebody feel free to stop me. NAGB, so the National Assessment Governing Board, is not in a position to confront what might be existing state policy regarding what languages a large-scale assessment can be administered in. And so there is limited ability to differentiate and administer the assessment. I think you're asking a great question, but to the extent that they're breaking out the data by subgroup, we do have that. What we don't necessarily have is, NAGB doesn't have the ability to administer the assessment itself in various languages. Now, that being said, we do know that, there are not consequences for the students, and it's I don't want to say opt-in, right? Because it's administered and we want to encourage folks to take it. But before a student is identified, for example, there's usually a window of time between the first days that a child is enrolled, and sometimes depending on their enrollment cycle, it can span almost 18 months before they would be asked to even participate in this type of assessment. So there, again, like I said, with regard to multilingual learners, there are a unique set of factors that are involved. We do have a desk area analyst, just like me, who specifically studies policy matters pertaining to multilingual learners. And I would be happy to put you in touch with them and have a more detailed conversation, because this is something that we think about a lot. We believe strongly in universal design for learning, and we really believe that our assessment methods should embrace and adopt those strategies for all learners. So we appreciate the good question.
Thank you so much, Christine. And participants, if you have any questions, we do have a few more minutes. There is another question from Ron. How are the cut points for the 3 breakout areas determined? And is it related to the population under the standard bell curve? Ebony, could you respond to that?
I was going to turn that to Nardi. So
Okay.
the achievement level setting process is conducted by the governing board. We just make sure that our assessment covers the full framework.
Sure. Nardi, could you add to that?
Let me unmute. That was when I just sent a message to Stefan. Unfortunately, I am not on that committee that sets that. I do know we have several different committees. I'm on the assessment development committee, where we actually look at the framework and stuff like that. And there is another committee that works on the cut points. And so they have a lot of conversation. They go back and forth. So that one, I do not know how they set it. I do know they have several conversations about that.
Right. And they are set during the framework process, right? So it's not necessarily based on how students perform operationally. Like, these cut points have been established a while ago, and we just keep them and measure how much students fluctuate between them.
They're also based on competency, are they not? So for example, you don't have a standard rate of failure that you're trying to meet. It's about the number of students that are meeting the learning objective. And so to answer, Ron, we will follow up with you. And thank you for your good question. But to offer a partial response, I believe that from a measurement standpoint, it would not be so much about we're not having the students compete against each other. They're competing against the standard, so to speak, right? To put it very roughly. So a bell curve wouldn't necessarily apply.
Thank you. Thank you all. And thank you again, Michael, for your comment. At this time, Christine, if you would put the poll up, we're going to open the poll for participants to respond to at this time. A few questions that we have. How likely are you to access the Nationals report card online in the future? How likely are you to share resources and results from the nation's report card with your school community, fellow educators, families, and school leaders? And what tools or resources for educators would you like to see the nation's report card produce in the future? And so if you would take a few minutes and respond to those, and those answers will go back to the NEA and NADB for us to continue to make necessary support and adjustments that will benefit educators across the country. And Christine, I have no more questions. So at this time, I turn it back over to you.
Perfect. And thank you all so much. We're really enjoying seeing the results roll in, and we appreciate your honest feedback. We are going to use this to help plan our follow-up, and not to put everybody on the spot, but potential future events, because I just appreciate you all so much for making the time to spend the night with us. Thank you to all the participants. In closing, I did have just a couple of quick housekeeping announcements, and we wanted to make sure that we share that information, that contact information with you just one more time tonight before we call it an evening. And that is, we're really hoping to gather some stories that can tell us about whether and how you put assessment tools from the nation's report card into action. So whether you utilize a sample assessment like Nardi walked us through earlier, or perhaps you play with some of the dashboards to think about whether or not there are relevant trends in proficiency and achievement by either subgroup or access to technology. There are so many insights that you can get from the nation's report card. And if you use one of those to inform your instruction or your advocacy or your communication to families, students, or the community, we really want to hear about it. So email us at futureofschools@nea.org. You'll get straight to me, and we are planning on uplifting those stories on NEA Today and through some of our other media outlets, because we believe that having this low stakes assessment and all the rich data that it provides is really important to not just empowering transparency in our education system, but also empowering teaching and learning. Second, if you happen to be in a district or school in the future where there is a NAEP administration, we're really hoping that you will help us out by supporting the administration. And, that looks and sounds like encouraging students, giving them a more well-rounded picture of what the nation's report card does for students and schools, the insights that it provides, and importantly, answering survey questions. If you are lucky enough to get access to one of these surveys, please answer it. Encourage your colleagues to do the same. We don't always have a lot of voice. And sometimes when we lift up our voices to advocate for an issue, it's really helpful to have an impartial source evidencing our claims, right? So when we talk a little about our confidence or our students' confidence or the resources and technology and tools, space that are available to us, this is a nonpartisan, impartial resource that we can point to provide some really rich data points when we are looking at the conditions of teaching and learning in our schools. And then finally, we have NEA Ed Communities. It's our homegrown own online headquarters for all things NEA. And there is a group called the Assessment Action Network. We will be sure to send it in the follow-up email, but that is kind of the main jumping off point for everything from the announcement of new tools and resources to special invites to things like this webinar. So this was a special webinar that we put on for folks who contributed to the creation of the Principles for the Future of Assessment, folks who I interacted with at one of our recent representative assemblies, and folks who I may have encountered at everything from Leadership Summit to state association. So we never ever forget about you. I'm so honored that so many of you joined us this evening. Thank you again on behalf of the National Education Association to Nardi Roughton and Ebony Walton, Darian Spann, and of course, Stefan Harris for all of your hard work. And with that, we're going to go ahead and end our webinar for this evening, but we appreciate you all deeply, and we hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you.